Hello ladies and gentlemen, Gamester here. This is the tank guide for Normal and Heroic Blackhand, the final boss in Blackrock Foundry. Now tanking this encounter is moderately difficult. There are 3 different phases that the raid will go through. Throughout each of the phases you'll deal with some core mechanics that will slightly alter the way that you're handling your tanking duties. But for the most part, these 3 core mechanics are going to be present and dealt with in roughly the same way throughout the fight. So the first of these core mechanics is Marked for Death, which is targeting 2 random range players in your raid, and after 5 seconds will cause Impaling Throw to be thrown from the boss's location to those players. You'll see the arrows from the boss's position that indicate the direction that he's going to throw those attacks at. Now for the most part as a tank you will only need to avoid these. You want to make sure you're not in line of sight with the arrows that are indicated so that you don't get hit, and instead it goes where it's intended to go. There's an exception in Phase 2, which we'll talk about specifically when we get there, but for the most part I just want you to be aware that this mechanic is frequent and you should do your best to avoid it. Make sure you're not in front of the arrow. The second core mechanic are the Slag bombs, and these are dropped by the boss himself in the first few phases of the fight in sort of a triangle pattern around his location. After a few seconds they will activate, and any player that steps on one will cause it to explode within 10 yards, dealing moderate damage, but more importantly, causing you to take 100% increased damage for 15 seconds. So, this is one of the very frequent abilities you'll have to deal with when tanking. Make sure you watch your positioning, watch the timing of those slag bomb casts, and just step away from them. For the first and second phases, this will generally involve moving the boss after a slag bomb series is cast, so that both yourself as a tank and other melee DPS are not in danger of stepping on them. The final core ability, as we loop back to the beginning here, is probably the most common to deal with for tanks, and that's Shattering Smash. This will target the current tank of the boss, so whoever the boss is attacking. It will create a small smash circle. The radius emanates from the center of that tank's position, and just a few yards around him or her. And within the smash, any players within it will take a heavy amount of damage, but it's split among all the people inside the circle. Since this circle is centered on the targeted tank's location, it means that tank dictates where this circle will be positioned. It also means that tank cannot avoid the ability. So for the majority of the fight, the current tank obviously gets hit by the smash, and this will do a severe amount of damage to them and also knock them backwards. The tank always goes backwards in the direction opposite the boss, so directly behind their position since they're tanking the boss at the time. Other players that get hit within the circle will be knocked in a direction opposite the tank. Since the tank is the center point of that circle, those players are knocked in whichever opposite direction they were relative to that center point. So generally, this is mostly used on Phase 2 and 3, and again, we'll talk about the specifics later. But the idea is basically the current tank gets smashed, takes heavy damage, gets knocked away, and you have to deal with this in some way. So now that we've covered the core mechanics, we'll go through each phase briefly and talk about how these core mechanics are weaved into that particular phase. So in the first phase, you will notice that the outside edge of the room we'll start to have a ever-growing seepage of slag, molten slag essentially. And this starts to cover more and more of the room from the outside in over duration of the phase. Stepping into this will deal very heavy stacking damage, and the more time you spend in it throughout the phase, the more damage subsequent ticks will deal to you. The debuff is essentially permanent for the phase. This is relevant to tanks in 2 ways. The first is right away, you're generally going to be pulling the boss, near the edge, wherever he happens to be at the time, and he will drop some bombs down. But when Molten Slag comes in and touches a bomb, as you're seeing on the top left there, it will explode that bomb. So it's critical as a tank that you pull the boss away from the edge and away from existing bombs so that both yourself and other melee players are at least 10 yards away in case the slag triggers nearby bombs. Now dealing with Shattering Smash in Phase 1 is left up to the current tank at the time to solo it, perhaps with the the addition or help of a priest in your raid if you have one available. But generally speaking, the basic idea is that you, as the current tank of Blackhand at the time, will soak the smash yourself. No one else needs to be in it because it doesn't do that much damage early on. Use a personal cooldown to help you survive that damage. But more importantly, the knockback effect will launch you into the slag on the outside edge. And getting out of this as quickly as possible is critical. Now, in the first phase, the smash does stun you, so you're not able to use sort of escape mechanics or personal teleports or things like that when the smash hits. So for that reason, if your raid has it available, you can utilize a life grip from a priest after the smash hits, but while you're flying through the air, to grip you back to safety without actually landing in the slag, taking all that damage. If that's not a possibility, the best thing you can do, as I mentioned, is use a cooldown when smash is about to hit to preempt that damage as well as the subsequent damage from the slag ticks. And of course, when you land, try to do your best to increase your survival and get out as quickly as possible. The other critical aspect about Shattering Smash is that it is a threat drop mechanic. So when you, as the current tank, get hit, it's up to your tanking partner to immediately taunt the boss. Or they don't necessarily have to taunt. They'll probably have higher threat than everyone at that point, but just something to be aware of. Because you cannot really allow the boss to drop the threat on the current tank and have him swing and hit a melee DPS or something. Now, for the second phase, once the boss hits about 71% health, everyone will be dropped down into the next platform to begin phase 2. During this, you want to immediately pull the boss off to one side of the room or the other. We usually start with the east side because that is the side that you're going to deal with the first new mechanic in this fight, which is the balcony and the iron soldiers that are spawning up top. The basic idea here is that the current tank, along with a handful of raid members, will utilize the upcoming smash to get knocked up onto the balcony and deal with the majority of the iron soldiers that are up there. The iron soldiers do a heavy amount of damage to the raid, so throughout the phase, you have to kill them fairly quickly to keep their numbers low so that players don't die from that damage. So the general rule of thumb, as mentioned, is that the first set of soldiers always spawns on the east side of the room, and you want to pull the boss slightly in that direction, not directly underneath the balcony because the smash does have an arc trajectory. So you want to make sure you're far enough away that you actually can get to the top of the arc before you get underneath the balcony and it shuts you down or something. So just pull them slightly to the east toward that eastern balcony, and then you'll have mines coming out, and then you're getting ready for the first smash to launch you and the other assigned raid members up top. This is a tricky thing to get used to. The critical thing is when you, as the current tank, are waiting for that smash, try to do your best to stay stationary. Keep your back to whichever balcony you're going to at the time, and just stay put if you can. This will make it a lot easier for the raid members that are trying to align themselves behind your position to also get knocked in the correct direction and go to the balcony that they intend to. If you move around too much, particularly when the smash is about to happen, it's going to be very difficult for people to get launched properly and get up top where they need to be. Once you are on top of the balcony, just do your best to help kill the soldiers very quickly. They don't have very much health. You can use area of effect attacks or just single target and burst a few of them down. There's a stacking debuff that will apply while you're up there, so you cannot stay up there indefinitely, and the main reason that you can't is because you need to come back down and help your tanking partner for either the Impaling throws, the third set, which we'll talk about in a moment, or just the upcoming smash where that person will lose threat, obviously. Now, I mentioned that you want to generally be tanking the boss off-center slightly if you can, either slightly east or slightly west. The reason for this is to deal with one of the other new mechanics, which is the Siege Maker. These will spawn from one of the 4 doorways on the outside of the room, and they spawn from whichever doorway is the furthest from the boss's current position. Because it's important that your raid members, your ranged DPS in particular, that are dealing with the Siege Makers, are able to know where the Siege Maker is actually going to spawn, you want to try to tank the boss in that off-centered position. That way, the person that's in charge of the Siege Maker will know that it's going to come in the opposite door from that side. So the basic idea is that the ranged DPS will be kiting these around and running them through the existing bombs that the boss leaves behind. Meanwhile, players with the Mark for Death and the Impaling throw mechanic as mentioned at the beginning, will be hiding behind these to sort of dodge the throw effect. And instead it will hit the Siegemaker and reduce the armor so the Siegemaker can take damage and all that good stuff. The Siegemakers themselves are ignored by tanks, but your general purpose here is to just be aware of what the rest of the raid is doing using them. Watch for the arrows as the marked for death throws go out to them, and try not to be too close to the Siegemaker so they don't get hit by their pushback attack from the front of them, or when they run over mines or bombs, you don't get too close and get exploded by one of those bombs. So in addition to movement, once bomb sets come out, staying stationary for the smash to get knocked on the balcony, probably the most important aspect of Phase 2 for tanking is dealing with every third set of Marked for Death and Impaling throws. The reason that this third set is particularly important is because the general goal for the raid as a whole will be to kill every Siegemaker around the second set of Impaling throws. This will prevent it from covering the room with fire, which is generally going to be bad. However, this means that every third set of Impaling throws, since the Siegemaker will be dead after the second, are not able to be soaked by an existing Siegemaker. There will not be one active. So instead, they will go out to hit raid members. Because of this, it's generally going to be advisable for the raid to try to have one of the tanks help soak up one or both of these throws. The general reason, of course, is that the throw damage itself does moderate damage on the initial hit, but more importantly, it applies a 45-second dot debuff, and this will stack up. Dealing with this damage on random raid members is pretty difficult, but dealing with the damage on a tank who's already receiving heals anyway is much easier. So the most likely strategy that you'll want to use is to try to have a single tank that is the off tank soak up these throws on the third set, every third set. So you can see where the arrows are coming out. If the two targeted players with mark are close enough to one another, they can stand on top of each other so that the arrows overlap, and you as the tank that's soaking them can just stand in that arrow and soak up both hits. Now if the players are too far apart, they can't get close together, the arrows are pointing in opposite directions, for example, you can still technically soak both of them as a tank. You just have to stand dead center in the boss's model. If you're deadly center where he is, deadly center, in dead center, you will be technically the first player hit by the throws, since they emanate from the center of his position, and therefore you'll soak both of them. Worst case scenario is you're not able to get both of them every time, but getting at least one and then the other one hitting whoever targeted is not the end of the world. It's just ideal that you get both of them. So generally speaking, because of tank swap timings, smashes up top, and all that good stuff, you will be alternating these with your tank partner. So the off tank will pick up the double throw set. That player will be pushed away because the throw has a knockback mechanic associated with it. So that's why the off tank is intended to soak it, so that the current tank doesn't get thrown and move the boss far away. And then you swap after the smash that comes up. So the tank with the dot debuffs will then taunt and hold the boss down below while the other tank is up on the balcony. And then you'll trade off for the next round and just rotate over and over. Now finally, when the boss hits about 31%, he will transition to Phase 3, once again knocking the entire raid down below, and you'll be on the final platform. Immediately what you need to do is pull the boss to the edge of the room. It doesn't really matter which edge you use, it's generally just a circle, the platform it is. And there are a couple methods you can use for tanking in this phase, but the highly suggested method that our raid used that worked really well is to essentially have two tank assignments. One tank is dealing with the bombs, so you're the bomb tank. The other tank is dealing with the smash, so you're the smash tank. So if you're the bomb tank, when the phase begins, you want to have threat on the boss and immediately pull him to the edge as mentioned. So if you don't have threat, obviously taunt him. And face the boss outward with your back to one of the edges of the room, so whichever edge you chose. Almost right away, the bomb effect will be used in this phase, and in this phase, the bombs are targeted on 3 raid members. One of the bombs will target you as the current tank always, and 2 of the other bombs will target random raid players. After a few seconds, all 3 of you will explode, as you see there in the back, and leaving a crater as well as just the general explosion mechanic where anyone within that 10-yard radius gets that slag damage and debuff. So the bomb tank's general rule here, or goal, is to pull the boss to the edge with his or her back to the outside platform. Stay there until the bomb targets you and explodes, and then the smash tank will taunt off you at that time. This will reduce the amount of time that the bomb tank is actually tanking the boss while he or she has the 15-second slag debuff. So here you can see we'll loop back through and you can see exactly what I'm talking about here. So our paladin tank is our bomb tank, and he's pulling him to the edge, puts his back out to the edge, keeps the boss there. Now our tank has the bomb in the center, the other two people go on either side, they all explode, and then our smash tank will taunt, which is our monk in this case, and face the boss to the other direction. Now once the smash tank has control of the boss, as mentioned, you want to face inward with your back to the center of the room, essentially center of the platform. This is because in the final phase, the smash effect is actually a massive Shattering Smash, which means it does a huge amount of damage and requires the vast majority of the raid to be inside the smash effect to help split the damage, otherwise it will kill people. If it does not hit at least 4 people, it will recast much more frequently than it was before. So it's always in the raid's interest, and you as a tank, to make sure the majority of the raid is hit by this. The basic idea is that you as a smash tank will taunt after the bombs have exploded, as mentioned, keeping the boss facing inward with your back to the center, and just stay stationary. If you can, try to get a raid mark on yourself, and maybe use some enlarge mechanics, but you want it to be clear where you as the smash tank are positioned and stay stationary so that the raid members can position themselves behind you appropriately so they don't get knocked off the side accidentally or into slag pools or something like that. So here you can see we're all lined up behind the blue marker, which is our monk smash tank, and waiting for that next smash to come up. Oh, well, we transitioned actually, sorry. But then we will get all knocked backwards, including the tank. And as soon as that smash knockback hits, the bomb tank taunts to keep the boss generally in position, moves to the next spot, and this process repeats back and forth. All right, so just to make it clear, we'll talk about the overall positioning and tank swaps of the final phase. It's just a very quick cycle. So here we are on the smash tank. There's the smash cast. Everyone is stacked up behind him who's got a blue marker. And immediately after that smash, you can see the boss stayed in the back because our bomb tank, our paladin, taunted him. As soon as the taunt occurs, that bomb tank needs to start rotating. In our case, our raid is rotating clockwise. So rotate the boss. You want to make sure you pull the boss at least 20 or 30 yards in the next direction away from the smash location. Because as you can see, the smash will be converted into a large slag pool, a circle radius that no one needs to stand in. So the bomb tank pulls him, clockwise in our case, to the next outside position. Here you can see we're a little bit close, so you want to pull him a little further. You can see we're trying to adjust after the fact so that you're not too close to that slag pool. Anyway, the bomb tank waits for the bombs. Now here again, our monk tank, our smash tank is taunted, stayed stationary, everyone stacked up behind him so we could get knocked backwards. Then the paladin bomb tanks taunted again, moved him over. Here we're in our next position, waiting for the bombs. There are the bombs. Monk tank taunted for the smash, and this process repeats. So overall, for tanking, it's pretty simple. You just have to make sure you watch those positions. As the bomb tank, you do not want to be inside the massive smash if you can avoid it. You do not need to help soak the damage. It's not enough damage that it requires one extra person inside it. And more importantly, if you stay out of it, you will then be able to taunt immediately after the smash and pull the boss to the next position right away. Be aware that as the bomb tank, you will have that 100% damage taken debuff for short duration after the smash occurs, depending on the timing. So don't be afraid to use a personal cooldown as this tank to help to mitigate some of that damage while the rest of the raid comes back into position. The other mechanic, like Mark for Death and Impaling Throw, generally will not apply for tanks. Most of the time, the raid members will be moving slightly to the right or to the left to make sure that no one else gets hit by these. So just as normal, do your best to make sure you do not stand in line with those arrows, indicating where those are being thrown. So, I think that's about it. Like I said, overall, it's a moderately difficult tank fight, but most of it just comes down to getting used to those core mechanics and then adjusting slightly for each phase. So, as always, good luck, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.